conference in South Africa and possibly in Africa. So let's give ourselves a hand because we've been doing pretty good. So we are on the graveyard shift. So usually after lunch, most of us get tired and bored. But this time we are not going to, because the subject we're going to talk about is one that is possibly one of the most anticipated subjects of Teamspeak. I am Molifa Kumona, the digital editor for Drum Magazine. So our next subject, we were discussing it last night, as Marie, the move editor, Nonzwakazi, and Dudu. So if you guessed it right, it's politics. And we have some of the best minds in politics in the house, and they will be talking all about it. Who will be the next president? ANC 54th National Conference. And we are streaming live. So this is a live stream on News24 Network. We also have HuffPost SA as well as Daily Sun. So please help me welcome Pieter from HuffPost SA, Waldimar from Rapport, Dumisane from City Press, Mahlatse from News24, Reggy from Daily Sun, and this is all chaired by the beautiful head of video at News24, Jerusha. Please take it away.
I think Jerusha will do. Oh, okay.
Reggie. Reggie's trying to appropriate my chair without compensation. It's really cool to be here, and it's really exciting to be having this conversation with these incredible colleagues, particularly this year. I don't know about you guys, but I can barely believe that it's only April. Yeah.
May.
It's May.
May.
May. So, and obviously a very special welcome to all our viewers who are joining us at home. We're live now on News24, Netwerk 24, on Daily Sun, and on Huffington Post. So if you're watching us via the YouTube stream, you can comment in real time, and hopefully we'll be able to get back to you soon. So I'm going to kick it off with a little game. Mahlatse, maybe you can sit a tiny bit back so I can see Waldimar. The rest of you are perfect. And kind of like Oprah, I've put something under your seats. So if you'll just have a look. Funny story. You can show the audience what you've got. That was in my laptop case, and when I was at the airport, I had to open my laptop and take those out, and the women at airport security honestly thought I was insane. She didn't ask me what I was doing with them, but she looked at me really, really suspiciously. So we're going to play a quick fire round, and then we're going to get the audience involved. I'm going to ask you a question. The answer can only be Cyril or NDZ, and you're going to give us your first thought, your first impression, your opinion. Nobody's going to hold you to this, and there's no money being placed on it.
But the internet never forgets.
The internet never forgets, that's true. But never mind. Let's have some fun. If Ellen can do it, we can do it. The first one is, who will be South Africa's next president? We'll start off nice and easy. Oh, whoa. Dumisane? Mahlatse, you get the deciding vote.
I get the deciding vote. Wow. I can't put both of them up.
No. Because
President of the ANC, president
them.
of the country. Two centers of power.
Interesting. Okay, who's going to be the next president of the country? Let's go with that one. Yeah? So, Mahlatse, do you think that we'll have a separate president of the ANC and a separate president of the country?
No, I don't think so. I think the whole issue of two centers of power has been clarified over the years. It would definitely create confusion, and I don't think that the ANC would ever even think about something like that. I think the one tradition they will stick to is that the president of the party becomes the president of the president of the party becomes the president of the country.
Right, let's take it to the audience. Hands up. Who will be the next president? NDZ. Cyril. Adram Basson, you're in the minority. All right, who would be a better president?
Who will be? Better president.
Mahlatse.
I think it's quite a difficult one to answer because both of them are a bit different. I feel like we still have to hear a little bit more from Nkosazana.
You're going to give me an essay every time
yes,
I ask
I will.
a question. All right. Who will be the best president?
Who will be the best
The
president?
better one.
Who? Half of half?
Oh my goodness. Who would be the better president? Cyril? NDZ? Interesting. In whom would international investors have more confidence?
That's too easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Does everybody agree? Yeah. Who's better equipped to deal with issues around social grants?
Obvious choice.
Mahlatse again. Cyril, does everyone agree? Yeah. And who is more popular with the current NEC? Interesting. All right, we're going to get into a conversation, but we're going to keep these two heads. And if you guys have a Cyril or NDZ question to ask the panel, just stick your hand in the air now. We'll get a mic to you, and then you can ask. So, does anybody have a Cyril or NDZ question? Think about it. We'll get to you.
Yeah.
You got one? Number 2.
This is directed at Pieter, who specifically has spoken in the past of Cyril's weaknesses and strengths. And I'm just wondering, given the recent developments, does one consider Cyril to be in a strong or a weak position? And does he really speak to any constitution in South Africa? Does he have a constituency, rather, in South Africa?
It's a good question, Eugene. I think the last 2 elections we've had for the ANC president, obviously President Jacob Zuma used KwaZulu-Natal very much as a building block and as a base from where to launch his campaign. The big criticism against Cyril, of course, was that he doesn't have a constituency. His aides, the last 6-8 months, have been saying he's working very hard at branch level, and we've seen in the last couple of weeks, Eugene, that he has moved into the stronghold of KwaZulu-Natal. The last couple of days he visited the Shembe church. He's on the ground. His office sends out a diary of events every day. So he's working very hard. He doesn't have a traditional constituency, but he might stitch together a constituency, an alliance of the wounded, very much like Jacob Zuma did in 2007.
Jerusha, if I may, neither candidate has the same kind of on-the-ground constituency as Jacob Zuma had going into any of the conferences that he was participating in. One could also ask questions about Dr. Dlamini Zuma's support on the ground, given her absence from the country, very calculated absence in Addis for a number of years, and her mixed record as a cabinet minister before that. What counts in her favor possibly is that she served both under former President Mbeki and President Zuma, so she has some credibility there, but she doesn't enjoy the kind of mass support on the ground, which the Zuma camp, I think, would have hoped they could go into December with.
But I also think we have to remember that in 2012, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma got the highest number of votes to get into the NEC. So she was definitely popular 5 years ago. But obviously with her absence from South Africa, those that are pushing for her have been lobbying quite hard. But whether they will have those delegates going to conference, I guess we'll start seeing at the June policy conference. And also, I think Ramaphosa himself is facing a very divided ANC, because if you look, for example, you can go to a province like Limpopo, that is divided. KZN, that's also very divided. So I think at this moment, I think that both of them still stand a chance, and there's no one who has more support than the other. I think it's still very early days. I think a week in ANC politics is a very long time. You were just talking about, can we believe it's still May? I mean, 3 weeks ago, everybody was saying that the Cyril campaign is very dead. And he came in, went to the Eastern Cape and launched it. And now there's that energy again within his camp. And people have already been lobbying. I mean, I was shocked that in Sukhdeo, where I come from, there was a car branded CR17. This was 3 weeks before he actually came out and said, I am standing, listen to me, this is what I am standing for. So the lobbying has been going on. But I think at the June conference, that's where we're going to start getting a sense of who has the better advantage at which province?
Right. Now, Mahlatse and I share our office at News24 in Johannesburg, and News24 Joburg's been playing the Where's Cyril game as recently as 2 months ago, kind of like the politics version of Where's Wally, but that's clearly not the case anymore. Cyril is out. Dumisane, I want to, out and about rather, I want to go to you. You have a very interesting perspective on that sort of grassroots, ground level support that neither Cyril nor Nkosazana seem to have at this stage. But you've got a very interesting perspective on that it's actually a great place for smaller parties to play, and we're seeing that in Matatiele. Tell us about that.
You look and go back in 2005, we had a deputy president who had been fired, and he didn't have a job. And what did he do with his time? He went to around the country. He had the means. He had a presidential protection unit in his side. He had cars. He could go everywhere. And he went around amassing support to go and tackle Mbeki in 2007 in Polokwane. And as a result, he was standing at the right space, and he had the masses behind him. And you come this side now, 2017, 10 years later, we're going to this conference at Gallagher Estate. You're looking at Cyril. You can say white monopoly capital, that's what people say. It's behind him and so on. And you're looking at Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. What does she stand for? I don't know. You can tell me. Anyone knows? We don't know. But she's there. She's being pushed by Zuma. Why? Because there's small matters of 783 charges, fraud charges that are outstanding that needs to be dealt with. And there's a DA that is busy pushing and so on with those charges. And then now you've got these smaller parties. Why do we have these smaller parties? Are we 23 years later, do we really need to have smaller parties, or do we really have to have at least 2 or 3 strong parties that can rule the country? ANC now is held at ransom by AIC in Matatiele. And you look at Vuwani, 2 different, same issues, but then they are dealt differently because why? ANC has got so much to lose if they give away, they don't deal with the Matatiele matter. Whereas in Vuwani, it's an ANC stronghold, so those ones can be dealt differently. It's going to be an interesting one.
Reggie, perhaps the idea of smaller parties comes down to the fact that many South Africans feel as though the big parties, we just often feel like in good conscience we cannot put our vote behind perhaps the ANC, who we once trusted but who are severely compromised. Perhaps the DA looked hopeful and now we see problems, particularly land problems in Cape Town. The EFF seem hopeful, but do they really have any governance experience? Do you think that's what South Africans are feeling? Where do I put my vote?
Smaller parties have the advantage of locality. I mean, in Matatiele, the one that Dumisane is mentioning, the party made it quite clear to the ANC that you're going to rule if you do 1, 2, 3. They did the same with the ANC in Ekurhuleni. The ANC nearly lost Ekurhuleni. You look at what they're doing with the DA in PE, with the UDM, they're in charge, and I mean, Ed Hall's deputies giving him nightmares. So smaller parties have that kind of a leeway. But I mean, it's a leeway that they know also they cannot continue be frustrated by the ANC being in charge of them. I mean, in December, 4,000 people are going to decide for 56 million people. I mean, how can that be? And those 4,000 people largely is people who are dominated by the Premier League, by KZN. So suddenly, I mean, NDZ is like she's been giving this thing on a platter in a way. Because if you look at it, KZN all of a sudden is the biggest, we have known, it's the biggest ANC province, but their numbers are getting out of control. They are close to over 70,000. Mpumalanga's numbers are growing. And these are provinces where the Premier League is dominating, and they clearly want their person, and they know who that person is. It's the better devil and the necessary evil that we'll have to deal with for the next 5 years.
Jerusha, yeah, but this is the first ANC elective conference in December into which delegates will go without the guarantee of an attractive ANC victory in the next national election, right? It's of course, it's likely, but it's not guaranteed in the same way that it was before any previous policy conference, as long as the ANC has existed after '94. So That does change the calculation a little bit. One can be very cynical and say that delegates will vote based on cash or gifts or personal financial interests, which candidate can disperse enough patronage before the elective conference to guarantee votes. But they will also know that their jobs as councillors, as members of provincial governments, are only guaranteed if the candidate who's elected in December is more likely to take the party to a bigger victory in 2019. This has never been the case in a policy conference.
But I think also, just to add, I mean, if we have these two factions going to the elective conference, I think both sides actually do agree that they run the risk of inheriting a shell of an ANC, because this is quite divisive. I mean, we saw it in Polokwane, but I think this time around it could actually cost them power in government. And we do know that behind the scenes there are attempts to try and see if there's any way of bringing the two front runners together. But whether they'll be successful, I'm very doubtful, given that just looking at an age factor, this is probably their only chance at the presidency. I don't think that in the next 5 years, in the next elections, they would have the stamina to even run. And I think because we have a fairly young population, it will be the time for the next generation of ANC leaders to actually lead. So whether there will be a unified slate that emerges in the next 5 months, I'm a bit doubtful. But everybody is agreed that they are going to inherit a shell of an ANC. And then what do you do in that situation? Whether they'll be able to put aside their differences and maybe do a Lesotho kind of thing that says you can govern for 2 years and then I govern for the next 2 years, it remains to be seen. But I think the biggest challenge that the ANC faces is that how do they emerge out of the elective conference in December and then start the campaign towards 2019 and still have both sides in the game pushing for the party?
So let's vote again. Who do you think has the potential to regain ANC voters by 2019? Who has more potential, at least? Waldimar says Cyril. Reggy agrees. Dumisane agrees. Pieter agrees.
Look, I think that Nkosazana faces a big dilemma. At the moment, she's only presented herself to be with the Jacob Zuma faction. And I don't think South Africans have an appetite of another Zuma governance, even though she's supposed to be a politician in her own right. Since her return from the AU, we haven't heard what she stands for. All we've seen is her with the Women's League, MKMVA supporting her. So by extension, she becomes a Zuma candidate. And given what has happened in the past 10 years, there is fatigue within the ANC and there is frustration in terms of the numerous scandals the president has been involved in. So she runs the risk of ensuring that the ANC probably gets below 50% at the next election. So, and maybe a Cyril campaign might make it a bit harder for opposition parties, because I mean, you talk to a lot of opposition parties, they'll tell you, if Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma wins it, you don't even have to change the ad campaigns. You just have to continue with it. And whereas Cyril, they might have to dig deeper than the Marikana ghost and find other things, because that's what opposition has been about the flaws of the ANC government. I guess Cyril Ramaphosa also faces being implicated in the cabinet decisions that are taken because he is a member of cabinet, and that could be the attack on him. But I think that if the ANC does stand a chance, you either have Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma coming out in the next few weeks, strategically distancing herself or creating her own campaign where we can hear her as an individual, we can hear what she stands for, or risk being associated with the president that has probably had the most scandals since the dawn of democracy.
Perhaps our minds would even be put at ease if we had some type of track record from her time at the AU, but there's also very little information on tangible change there.
I mean, I think that from the AU, I thought that one term was not enough. I think that she should have taken it if she was going to be in it for a second term. I mean, the AU is a very complex structure of the continent. She spent probably the first 3 years trying to come up with the vision for what Africa needs to look like in 50 years' time. And then she left. You know, and now the next person who's come in has the challenge of taking forward a vision that perhaps is not theirs.
Waldimar
She
wants to
showed
jump in.
no sign at the AU, Jerusha, of wanting or being able to preach to the unconverted, right? Bringing Francophone Africa into the fold and running steering a unified ship. There's no proof that suggests that she was good at that. And there was little sign of the kind of charisma that you need to speak to, you know, the undecided voter type, you know, people who are unconvinced about your merits. So I think she'll have difficulty with that. But just quickly wanted to add, the irony with Cyril is that the province where the ANC, you asked earlier about regaining lost votes, the province where the ANC has lost most votes is Gauteng, where Cyril is likely to receive a rather warmer welcome, I think, than Nkosazana. But in December, the ANC's position has been significantly weakened compared to previous ANC elective conferences. So the province where he's likely to fare better in a general election is a province which has a diminished voice in deciding who the next ANC leader will be. So it's you know, the decision might not serve the ANC's interests in 2019.
And a province that never backs a winner.
Yes.
Let's go to Dumisane.
The other issue that we're concentrating on these two, but then there are smaller nyana ones as well,
Yeah,
as one minister said. There's Lindiwe Sisulu that's emerging on the picture. There's Zweli Mkhize that's emerging on the picture. There's Jeff Hadebe that's also coming.
How seriously should we be taking those candidates?
I mean, this is politics. I think at the rate they are standing up, I think all of us stand a chance, eh? We can all stand. Provided we've got ANC membership, but I don't. But let's look at how serious are they. You look at a province like KZN. Zweli's big. He comes from there. He was the chairperson, he was the premier of that province for a long time, and he's got a good credible record of being an ANC leader. If KZN, divided as it is, because it's clear it's divided between Cyril and Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, and then Zweli comes in and KZN says, you know what, we want to get rid of faction politics, we're going to support Zweli. That will be a big blow for either camp. So they are serious, but at the end of the day, what are they pushing for? Everyone is pushing for a position in the top 6. You've seen Titi Mabuza in Mpumalanga. He's distancing himself suddenly from all the politics and says, I'm talking unity. I can only stand if there's only one, we agree on the type of leaders that we're gonna have. But we know that's not gonna be. So it's gonna be a very, very tough battle.
Reggie spoke about the growth in the provinces, and I think we need to take note of the fact that we're focused on these two, and we enjoy seeing them going hammer and tongs at each other sometimes, and going to the rural areas and trying to convince church leaders to support them. But the fight is at branch level. The fight is in the Premier League provinces that Reggie referred to. Northwest Province in Mpumalanga, Limpopo, the Free State. The ANC's numbers, they have almost doubled in some instances over the last couple of years. And how the ANC elective conference works, branches nominate paid-up members to attend the conference. And once a branch is fully paid up, then it only receives the right to vote at the conference in December. So the danger is, like we saw in 2012, where someone like Toit was accused of buying up branches, that branches can be bought, and that ghost branches even can be established to prop up certain candidate slates. So the gatekeeping function that we're starting to hear of at provincial level, the auditing function in the Secretary General's office, the auditing function to make sure that branches are paid up and that only members that have been properly mandated by their branches to go and vote, if you control that process, then it's much easier to manipulate it in December. And we saw in 2007 at Polokwane the influence of national intelligence, the influence of certain state institutions that supported certain factions. I think it's something that we should be cognizant of, and we enjoy the fights between these two, but it's going to be very important to see come October, November, when the provinces declare their support, which provinces are big. Historically, Northwest wasn't that big, the Free State wasn't that big, but the numbers have almost doubled the last couple of years.
I think the whatever faction beyond December, we need to, whatever faction will be in charge, they need to have a look at a document called Strategy and Tactics from the 1969 Morogoro Conference. That was the most ever challenging conference the ANC ever had in its history. And this year, it's a similar conference. It's a conference where they met in Tanzania, they were being faced with their leaders being jailed, they were now trying to establish themselves in exile. The liberation movement was divided between them and the PAC, and so there was the whole thing that they cannot be in South Africa, but they needed to sort of continue with their fight against apartheid. And that conference, they came out of it as a party that we are divided. We can't agree whether to even allow white people or colors into the party, but in the end, the ANC, they came through after that conference, besides those challenges. So whoever is going to come up, they need to say, 2019 is around the corner, it's now Jan 2018, what are we going to do? What's going to happen? One thing is for certain here, we're going to lose votes, what now?
But shouldn't that conversation be happening now, given that the opposition has already started campaigning for 2019? Because you're going to come out of a December conference, bruised, damaged, and fractured, and then you have the one challenge of trying to bring a party together while everybody else is campaigning for a very crucial national election. And that's why the consultative conference, if it had happened earlier, it would have at least tried to remove that burden for the next person who wins the presidency. Because I think that we can't undermine 2019 and how different it's going to be for our country. If the 2016 local government elections were anything to go by, I mean, you had the DA shocked that they lost Johannesburg. That was not part of their plan, but obviously unhappy ANC members decided to stay away from the vote. And, a pattern grows. You're literally going to be left with a year and a few months to try and mount a campaign under those challenges. So it would have been better if they were having that conversation now rather than after the elective conference.
I agree with Mahlatse because I have no confidence that the ANC has it in them to turn things around. The ANC has been, and you referred bruised and fractured and broken. I mean, 2007 was an enormously divisive conference. The ANC left Polokwane, and there was gargantuan divisions in the ANC when they left. We struggled with the two centers of power for 8 months. Then President Mbeki was unceremoniously removed. And ever since then, Jacob Zuma has ruled the ANC and governed with an iron fist. So the 2016 local elections, the news cycle moves so quickly. I don't think we've actually internalized what the impact of that election was. To lose Johannesburg, to lose Nelson Mandela Bay, which is the spiritual home of the ANC, Johannesburg, Soweto, the history behind the struggle, to lose that city, to lose the capital, was massive. And there's no sign that the internal fighting in the ANC is abating. And the divisive nature of this campaign will ensure that the ANC emerges from Gallagher Estate in December even more divided than it is now.
And Jerusha, the divisive nature of this campaign so early on, which started as an overt campaign for the leadership positions much earlier than before previous conferences also, makes it less likely that the negotiations that Mahlatse referred to earlier could happen to, for example, create a slate from both camps, with the top six drawn from both camps, because they are positioning themselves so overtly against each other and saying so much in public for the first time or more than before, that they seem almost irreconcilable. And that will have a huge impact on their ability in December to bring different candidates together and say, okay, let's try and unify at least the electorate in the run-up to 2019.
There's another view that actually Jacob Zuma was a blessing to the ANC. That him being in power actually will be a lesson for the ANC how not to elect a leader. So maybe it had to go to this extent that the ANC, to renew itself, it had to go through this process and lose power in 2019 or 2024 as soon as possible, so that they can go back to the drawing board and say, we've learned our lesson, how do we move from here? We were a liberation movement, and then from moving forward to be a governing party, how do we do that?
Although, Dumisane, as it stands, the ANC doesn't appear to be learning its lesson. We wait with bated breath after each cabinet reshuffle, each scandal, each allegation of state capture for somebody, usually Jesse Duarte, to this little woman to stand behind a podium and say, you know what, we're going to make a definitive call now on the leader of our party, and it hasn't happened time and again. When will they learn that lesson? Waldimar?
I share the cynicism articulated by some colleagues. There's no sign that the party has the level of self-consciousness to change course, especially because we've seen, even in the case of Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, a move to slightly more populist message taken straight from the hymn book of her ex-husband, immediately after her return from Addis. Her speech in Sasolburg, flanked as she was by Batabile Dlamini and the Women's League, who's you know, the Dua girls of her campaign already. You know, it's quite populist, and clearly the incumbent's camp believes that the way to win votes between now and 2019 is to go a little bit more populist, much more focus on radical economic transformation instead of growth. And then it forces ANC members and delegates to decide what kind of candidate and what kind of politics are more likely to solve our country's large problems, and what are those problems. And if you think the problem is mainly one of how the cake is currently divided, you'll go with one candidate. And if you think the challenge is to keep up with other emerging nations who are growing much faster than we are, and that the way to meet the aspirations of South Africans, young and old, rich and poor, is to grow the economy, then there's little doubt that you'll go with a candidate like this. So it hinges on huge ideological issues also, and issues of deciding what are the country's big issues and who's likely to be better at solving them, and there's no consensus on either.
You've touched on a hot point, and that's radical economic transformation. Ironically, the party that is now saying that we need to be more aggressive about it are the only people who've actually had the power to enforce radical economic transformation. Reggy?
I mean, you're talking about radical economic transformation. What is it? I mean, the party has been in power for 23 years, and the truth of the matter is the large constituency that supports the very same party still lives in poverty. So where was radical economic transformation in 1994? Why come up with radical economic transformation now? Yes, we need inclusive growth, we need the economy to grow, we need the triple challenges of poverty, inequality, and unemployment to go away, but explain radical economic transformation to all of us, and how is it going to become government policy? Because all we hear now is sweeping statements about radical economic transformation, and people are not elaborating. And these are people that are saying all these things. Rest assured that there's blind loyalty in terms of people who vote for them, whereas those people live in perpetual poverty. So what is radical economic transformation, and how is it going to move someone from a shack to an RDP to a suburb? It's not explained. All we hear, we get the Malikane proposals that are nothing but hogwash if we really untie them and debate them.
President Jacob Zuma, in his State of the Nation earlier this year, there was a whole build-up in the last couple of weeks before the opening of Parliament in February, and the ANC sent out the message that this is the year that we're going to see radical economic transformation, and President Jacob Zuma will take that forward. But during his State of the Nation address, I think he referred to it 9 times, but there was no substance to what he said. Then Treasury, in the form of the Finance Minister, Pravin Gordhan, decided we're going to take ownership of that term and give some substance to it. Now, inclusive growth that Waldimar referred to is world capitalism's answer to the ravages of capitalism the last 20 years, where the poor were left behind, and we saw today that the middle classes in developed countries were also to a certain degree left behind. So Pravin Gordhan and his team at Treasury tried to cast radical economic transformation in the mold of inclusive growth. And during his budget speech, the Minister of Finance, who was unceremoniously dumped last couple of weeks ago, try to explain what the framework is within which radical economic transformation can happen. We need to look at state expenditure. We need to look at the deficit, the budget deficit. We need to look at foreign debt. We need to look at our wage bill. And he tried to give substance to it. But the president doesn't agree with that, because the president is the leader of a party under pressure, and his supporters want a populist message. He sees it's actually gaining traction. So he then reappropriated radical economic transformation after Pravin Gordhan was fired. We had the World Economic Forum this week in Durban, and Moalusi, the Minister of Finance, again started singing another tune. So Reggie is totally right. We don't know what radical economic transformation is. The only guy that tried to give substance to that term is Pravin Gordhan, and he's out.
Jerusha, just
Let's go to Dumisane and then to Waldimar.
I remember back then I was still writing stories for City Press, and they just came back from Polokwane. And the first thing that the ANC did at the time was disband the Scorpion. That was quick, done much quickly as possible, and then they got rid of it and so on.
Kgalema Motlanthe.
Yes. Come now, President Zuma in February was 10 months away from losing power as ANC president, but still another 2 more years as state president, as the country's president. A lame duck president, if you can ask me, because once you lose the power of the party, you become useless. So, and now he starts talking radical economic transformation. If we really, really, really believe that this was the way to go for South Africa, I would have trusted those people to do that in 2009 or 2007, back then. Not 2 years or 10 months away from losing power. Basically, this is desperation. What does he have? His legacy project. I don't know, you tell me. What I do know is that there's lots of things that needs to be done.
Jerusha, I just wanted to add that, you know, study after study shows that most South Africans want jobs. That's what will change most poor people's perception of how they are doing, right? Now, jobs are becoming more difficult to give to people if you're a politician, because the world economy is changing so rapidly. And maybe 10, 15 years ago, it was plausible to promise job creation. But now around the world, we're seeing with technological change, there's huge destruction of jobs. And so the one thing that people want, the politicians can't promise anymore, not in Europe and not in South Africa. And so what remains is to give people that which already exists and which is a finite resource, land. You can't give people productive land, of course, because productive land is not a thing, it's a process. You can't give people land. So I think the focus on land instead of jobs. There are no promises that radical economic transformation will mean jobs, whereas that is what people are asking for. There are only promises that will mean, getting land, which fewer and fewer people can use productively because of what's happened to, economies of scale in agriculture. So we're heading for, globally and here, huge disparity between expectations and the promises that politicians can actually deliver on, and it's going to hit this government and it'll hit governments everywhere.
But I'm thinking now around what happened in Zimbabwe when President Robert Mugabe was just on the verge of losing the support of the war vets. And that's when he introduced his land reform program. And obviously a sign that when people are desperate for power, to stay in power, things start happening. So maybe that 10 months or the 2 years he still has in government, maybe something would happen. But I mean, I agree with my colleagues that they've had so many years to try, fail, and try again, and to deliver on all of those promises, but nothing has happened. I mean, throughout this past few weeks when they were launching the policy documents, there are a few words that stayed with me. I think some of them were said by Enoch and Fikile Mbalula. And they said, basically, we took the documents from the cupboard, dusted them a bit, and then put some perfume on them. And that's what we've been going through with the ANC, that, there are decisions that are taken, there are policies that are taken, but the implementation never happens. And then when you are about to have to leave power, then you start singing that tune again. And the question then should be, what are South Africans thinking about this? Are they at a point where they are feeling that we've given them enough chance and now it's time to try something else? And if we're using 2016 local government elections as a measure, they're not necessarily all going to the opposition, but they're choosing to stay behind and not actually go out and vote. So I think in the next couple of months, we might see what looks like movements of sorts towards something, but whether it will come to anything, I'm very doubtful.
I mean, Jerusha, if you look at it, the electorate is not stupid. I mean, take for instance the issue of land. Who's been making so much noise about land? It's the EFF. And the president agreed with the EFF in his State of the Nation address to say we need to address the issue of land, blah, blah, blah. Then his own party in parliament, they're supposed to vote with the EFF. What do? They contradict the very same guy they're supposed to listen to. And people are watching and they're listening, and they show them that we are actually not stupid. And we sitting here, we're saying there's only one way to show you that we're not stupid, and that's through the ballot. That's why all of us are sitting here and we are eagerly waiting for 2019.
Now, we've spoken a lot about the ANC, understandably, and I do want to get to opposition parties. But Waldimar, via email this week, you pointed out something very valid, and that's we often look at President Zuma and believe that that's where all our problems started. But actually, when we start looking at the heart of the ANC, we see problems that go much further back than President Mbeki.
Jerusha,
President Zuma, sorry.
Yes, indeed, but you mentioned President Mbeki, former President Mbeki, who I think today is part of launching this National Foundations Dialogue initiative, and I see that Mr. Malema has said that former President de Klerk shouldn't be part of that, etc. But under former President Mbeki, much of the rot started setting in to the ANC. There was a calculated effort to concentrate power, in the party. So under Joel Netshitenzi, who was policy chief in the late 90s, already the policy became formalized in ANC structures that the ANC must control all levers of power in society. And one wonders whether the electorate thinks that is a good thing or not. Because one of the unintended consequences, or perhaps you can be very cynical and argue an intended consequence of controlling all levers of power in society, and that included in these documents the police, the NPA, the courts, much of civil society, universities, etc., is that when you get a bad leader for the party, then he controls those levers of power. And that sounds a little bit like state capture. If you are somebody who believes that a pluralistic society is healthier and better run. So I think there are aspects of what we're seeing now that was actually planned inside the ANC to control really absolutely everything. And then they got a bad leader, and he's now kind of, pulling and pushing those levers. So I think it's something to remember is that the more powerful the presidency is, we saw this in the US also, where President Obama issued more executive orders than any previous US president. He concentrated power in the presidency, which then was handed to Donald Trump. If you concentrate power in an office or in a party and you get a bad leader, then society suffers severe consequences. And I think the personalization of South Africa's crisis in Jacob Zuma is really quite facile and not very smart. He's not the beginning and the ending of all our problems, and replacing him will not solve them. And just to add quickly, we must ask not only who will replace him, but what kind of politics will follow his presidency. Will it be a different kind of politics? Will it be a similar kind of politics?
One of the things that I can't handle with this year is that it's like we're pressing replay button of 2007, because the intelligence report were at the center of the fights between President Thabo Mbeki and then Deputy Jacob Zuma. You had the Browse Mole, now you have this intelligence report that included the former finance minister. You have the president being accused of using state resources for political gains. That happened also in 2007. We're seeing it again now. And then you've got SACP and COSATU now are not in favor of the president that they supported. They've stepped away. So it's like we're going through this nightmare again. We're just pressing the replay button, and it's just different faces. And I agree with you about individualizing the problem is not going to help, because the same question can be asked of Cyril Ramaphosa, for example. When he agreed to be part of the Zuma slate in 2012, there were already signs of problems were already emerging. Problems of him as a state leader. He decided to join that slate, and he basically endorsed President Jacob Zuma because at that time he was facing a credibility crisis, and he was the one that made sure that he actually emerges. And now he's the same person that we're looking to save the ANC's problems. And I mean, and now you can have maybe signs of the SG, Gwede Mantashe, seemingly leaning towards the Cyril Ramaphosa camp, but he had been there since 2007 with the President Jacob Zuma slate. So it's like we're just shifting a line. There's a line. Today I'm jumping this side, and tomorrow I'm jumping that side. And I think it has to be a collective responsibility by the ANC to say that we have allowed the rot to settle in, and you can't just simply say that one person is responsible for it. By never holding President Jacob Zuma accountable, they became accomplices. And they must also take that responsibility.
Yeah. Before we move on, sorry, Reggie, we're going to have to move on. Before we move on to talking about opposition parties, just an interesting thought about pressing replay. Our colleague Pieter Louis-Myburg recently came under fire from the Thabo Mbeki Foundation for insinuating that Mbeki had ever had anything to do with the Guptas. Unfortunately for former President Mbeki, there are photographs, but that's a different story. It really does feel like we're pushing that replay button. I want us to talk about the opposition because, of course, opposition politics are incredibly powerful in the country at the moment. We see through coalitions, the ANC have lost power in key metros. Let's go to Pieter on the end. The DA. What can we say about the DA right now, particularly with Helen Zille coming under fire for those tweets? Just what are your thoughts?
I think, well, let's put the Helen Zille issue to bed. It's Helen Zille is going through a disciplinary process at the moment. She's not a national leader, and I think the party is now Mmusi Maimane's party. 2016's municipal election was the DA's coming out party almost. There was a danger that the party would remain a regional party in the Western Cape. It's been ruling, or it's been governing Cape Town since 2006 in a coalition, a very fragile coalition initially, and then it took over the province in 2009. Now it's expanded into the heartland of the ANC. It's shown growth every year since 1994, in fact, and it was a party of 1.7%, if I'm not mistaken. It is now well into its 20s. Its challenge, of course, is to make inroads into the electorate that traditionally supported the ANC, into the black electorate, into the rural areas. It's still struggling with the image of a traditional white liberal party. Mmusi Maimane is working extremely hard to mold the party in its image. It has been battling with traditional ideas of liberalism. That's where the party's roots are. What does liberalism mean in the modern context? Should the party still follow those values that it espoused for so many years? But Mmusi Maimane has taken charge of the party. We should not lose sight of the fact that it is now governing in Port Elizabeth in a coalition. It's got the mayoralties in Tshwane and Johannesburg, which is massively important. So the DA is on a growth trajectory. Its parliamentary operations are stable. It's the biggest opposition party. It's the most effective opposition party. And Jacob Zuma is the gift that keeps on giving to the opposition. I'm sure they wouldn't want Jacob Zuma. They wouldn't want Jacob Zuma to lose power before 2019. He is the opposition parties, and especially the DA's, strongest draw card to vote for the opposition.
I disagree with you when you say that the Helen Zille issue, she's going through a DC. It is quite an important one within the DA to say which direction they're going to take against Helen, because their biggest crisis right now is identity. And you have a growing number of black members, and those black members are unhappy with her tweets that say that, to even say that there was something good about colonialism, that is an insult to a large number of them. And one thing that it has done is that those that doubted Mmusi and saw him as a Helen Zille protege are now finding themselves going towards Mmusi to actually stand with him on this issue. So the decision they take around Helen Zille could actually have a devastating impact on the DA itself. And I think that because she was a leader and a very powerful leader within the DA that took the party to its growth paths, what happened, how the party handles her will be quite crucial, and she still commands a lot of support within the party. So they're in a very tight rope, because on the one hand, they probably want to protect the traditional base of the DA and those that still support Helen Zille. But on the other hand, they've aggressively gone for the black population. And that black population is seething with anger over those colonial comments. And the fact that, she has continued to defend them, and they have really touched a lot of them. So it is basically going to be a big one for the DA. And maybe the DC is part of trying to see if there's a way of navigating out of it. But whatever action they take on Helen Zille could be a deciding factor on whether they continue to grow within the black population. And obviously, you have an ANC that is wounded, but they will also use that to continue saying, you can't say that you're a non-racial party when your former leader wants to say that the very thing that has brought us here where we are in South Africa, where we've got economic disparities, where we've got racial injustices and all of that, you protect that person.
But what I think we should give Mmusi Maimane credit for is that he's taken charge of the party. He hasn't let the Helen Zille issue cloud his judgment or dominate his leadership. He's come out very strongly saying he disagrees with Zille. He has denounced her tweets. So he's not deferring to the traditional leader of the party. He's saying, this is the direction we're taking, and this is my party, and this is where I'm leading them. So I think there's a tendency to initially, definitely after Mmusi was appointed, to say he is the anointed one by Helen Zille, and he'll defer to Zille. But he's taken charge of it, and I think we should give him credit for that.
I think many feel that a definitive outcome from this DC process against Helen Zille could potentially show DA voters that the DA really is serious about these issues. Now, we unfortunately are running out of time, but it would be amiss not to give at least some attention to the economic freedom fighters who grew exponentially ahead of the vote, our last vote, and who certainly will shape the next election. Dumisane, would you like to jump in here with your opinion or thoughts on the EFF this year particularly?
Land. I think that's where we go back to with the EFF. They came in, they found youth who are desperate, they don't have jobs. They're sitting on the street corners every day trying to look for jobs, or they've just given up on the jobs and so on looking for jobs. And the EFF came and said, we need to go and take the land. And we know Malema has got a court case yesterday that was postponed. And I think, so they spoke to the youth, what the youth's frustration is. Is that sustainable? That's the big question that we should be asking ourselves. I don't think so. Until when you get the land, what do you then do with the land? I think that's the most, the follow-up question to that. It will grow, and it will continue playing a bigger role in the country's politics. And give it 10 years, you might see something different in this country.
I think it's a party that, by and large, the policies are there, but the policies are radical. They have to be relooked. But what's been impressive with them is they've matured. That we have to give to them. They've matured. I mean, who would have thought that Herman Mashaba, as a new mayor of Johannesburg, would be giving his State of the City address, and out of all the parties that he can say thank you to, he's thanking the EFF. And they're sitting there, they're behaving, they're not even acknowledging, they're just sitting there saying thank you for your support. So that's a level of maturity. Here's a DA thanking the EFF, running Africa's biggest economy. So it shows you where they're going, it shows you where they're at, but they've been a necessary evil, more especially from down the road here in Parliament, because we are certainly awake.
Right.
Jerusha, just the frigid economic climate definitely, I think, will be friendly to the EFF. As jobs become scarcer and people become more desperate, I think their message will resonate more. But their growth was not bad between 2014 and 2016, but it was only 2 points, right, from 6 to 8%, which is a decent increase as a percentage of what they used to have. But it wasn't the kind of leap which they themselves promised. I think they were talking about 14, 15%. And I think in their negotiations now with the DA about possible coalitions in 2019, at least in Gauteng, and possibly I think the optimists in both parties hope that they might have talks about national government in 2019. I think they're quite realistic about the fact that the DA will still be the bigger party in 2019. That might not be the case in 15 years from now, but I think there's a sense inside the EFF that they'll not be the official opposition yet.
We're going to go to a quick video now. We hit the streets of Cape Town and asked South Africans what concerns them most about politics in South Africa, and then we're going to open it up to the floor. I know we have so much to talk about, but if you could keep your questions brief, and panel, if you could keep your answers briefer, we can try and get through as many questions as possible.
Most is corruption in politics at the moment and lack of accountability.
The politics, they don't consider the young people in the country here. They think about themselves.
Start with number 4.
Thanks, Jerusha, and thanks to the panel as well. Just a quick question. A few weeks ago, we saw the opposition come together, DA, UDM, and some civil society as well. Do you think this poses a credible opposition come 2019 to the ANC? Do you think a coalition of the opposition and civil society poses a credible opposition to the ANC come 2019?
Pieter, you can take this one.
Well, it's still a good couple of years away, but definitely what we're seeing is a groundswell of support, a groundswell between, and a coming together between political parties, non-governmental organizations, civil society, churches, and that's the catalyst certainly has been the last year, the debate around state capture, but in the last couple of weeks, the firing of Pravin Gordhan has really forced these disparate powers and interests and organizations to come together for the common good. I mean, it was quite remarkable to see today on a stage in Johannesburg, F.W. de Klerk and Thabo Mbeki telling each other, oh, I agree with what you're saying, I agree with that what you're saying. That would not have happened in the past. So there is a coming together in civil society. Political parties are seeing the opportunities that 2019 will give them as long as Jacob Zuma stays in power. But it's, whereas we predicted or expected or thought that 2024 might be the turning point, there's every chance that 2019 might be the turning point.
Let's go to Alette.
Hi, I also have a question for any of the panelists. With the US election, we saw how the media got it terribly wrong and in a sense almost became complicit in Trump winning that election. Are we sure that we are reading the situation in South Africa correctly, and what are we doing to make sure that we are in touch with what's going on the ground and that we are getting it right?
Can I take that?
Dumisane.
Thanks, Minette. I'll go back to 2005 to 2007 again. The media predicted that Thabo Mbeki was going to win Polokwane, and he didn't, and Zuma won. And I think that's the debate that we need to be having. What are the ANC branches discussing? Are they discussing Zuma? Are they discussing the issues that they are reading, that we're giving them as newspapers or as media, that this is what the country is all about? Are they discussing state capture? Are those the issues they are discussing, or are they discussing the issues of the stomach? What am I going to be eating tonight? Where am I going to get a job? Where will my water come from? Will I have illegal or electricity again? And I think that's where the debate is happening. And considering that that's where the 4,000 people that are going to go to elect a new president of the ANC are going to come, will be coming from. So those people, if they go there with a mandate that says, go and vote in this way, that's the only way they're going to vote. They're not going to vote looking at the issues that actually we are giving them as media.
Great. One at the back, please.
Is it me? A few days ago, Lindiwe Mazibuko boldly said to a lot of African leaders that there's a huge vacuum in African leadership, and we can't trust the current leaders because they've been in power so long and yet they haven't delivered. And on the back of the fact that we've got the students' movement who've managed to insource staff at universities that the ANC has failed in 20 years. Do you think that this is finally the impetus that will bring the usually apathetic youth to the polls, and perhaps we'll see a difference in 2019?
Lindsay, that's an easy one. I doubt there's anyone who disagree with Lindiwe Mazibuko's statement. Leadership in Africa is nothing but pathetic. Let's not beat about the bush about it. It's not there. There are no leaders. Second point, student leaderships, the student movement, fees must fall. I mean, we doffed our heads to them. We have taken note, and their issues are on a national platform, and we listen to them. So easy peasy there. If the ANC was not listening, so be it.
But I think she's asking about whether they'll actually come out and vote. We expected them to come out and vote in their numbers in the last 2 elections. The registration was at the highest point, but they actually didn't come out and vote. So I'm not quite sure if it's because there isn't a party that speaks their language. I mean, we expected with the EFF that they will be the catalyst to bringing that youth vote, but they didn't. And it is something that we must worry about as a nation. How do we get the activism that we're seeing at the universities then translated to I will go and stand in a queue and actually acknowledge that so many people gave so much of themselves so that I can have the right to vote and actually have your say either way. And I think it's a conversation we need to have as a society, especially because we are increasingly becoming a younger population. And if they are not coming out to vote, and people talk about patterns. If you didn't do it at a young age, what are the chances that you'll do it when you're older? So we need to seriously start doing some education around young people to say to them, there is an alternative. Go and find somebody who at least will speak on your behalf in Parliament. And I'm not sure what else needs to be done to make sure that that happens.
Get them into jobs, because the biggest driver of youth participation in elections is paying tax, income tax or VAT. I mean, if you're economically active, whether it's a micro business or in a formal job, you're likely to vote around the world. And lower youth participation rates are a global phenomenon. And I think education is definitely good, but in the long run, we'll only see young people vote in large numbers if they feel they have a vested interest in the quality of government. And most people only begin believing that they do when they start paying tax.
We have 2 minutes left. One more question. Matthew's got the mic.
Yes, so the role of the IEC is critical in 2019. And so the question really is there a possibility or a threat that the IEC could be captured or turned so that the election doesn't produce a free and fair result? Because obviously that would be the next major threat to the country.
I'm going to hand that question to Dumisane.
We saw there was a case in Tlokwe, if you remember. The IEC was taken to Tlokwe and then they had to rerun the elections there. And we saw after the elections of local government election, Gwedemantashe and I can't remember, I think the deputy SG as well, attacked one of the commissioners of the IEC and basically saying they did not do their part. I don't know what part they were supposed to have done. The credibility of the IEC, I think, is at stake, and whether will they be captured? I don't think they will be. They will try to do as much as they can to make sure that the elections are free and fair. But you need people of integrity to run that institution. And over the years, I think the IEC has proven that, just to be like that.
So that brings us to the end of our session today. Thank you so much. And to our viewers watching at home, thank you for joining along. Thank you for commenting. And remember to subscribe to our channels below. Thank you.
Thank you.